Have you ever been playing your favorite role-playing game and had that sinking feeling, a feeling that your choices don't actually matter? That no matter what you do, the so-called story is going to end up in the exact same place. That's the feeling of being railroaded, and it's one of the most frustrating experiences in tabletop role-playing game. And many people think that railroading simply means a linear plot, but there's a lot more to it than just that. A series of connected events can be a satisfying campaign, but it is made more so if the players are motivated and choose to follow that path. True railroading happens when a game master actively negates player choices to force a specific predetermined outcome. It's the conflict between the pre-written story and the player's inherent right to influence that story. Like a train on a track, it can't deviate from its set course, no matter what the passengers want. You see it come up when a brilliant creative solution to a problem, the GM basically just says, well, that doesn't work, just to make something pre-planned happen. Or when you uncover clues pointing to a different suspect in a mystery, and all of a sudden, they just mysteriously dry up. Those leads just go away. More insidiously, a GM might tell you how your character feels or what they do. A GM saying you find this person truly trustworthy and agree to help them strips you of your most basic control over your character. Now, this violates a core social contract of role-playing games. That is, the so-called story is a product of collaboration. Now, a solution to this problem isn't just a group or single tip or trick. It's a philosophy. It's about embracing the one thing that sets tabletop role-playing games apart from every other medium: player agency. This is your capacity as a player to make meaningful choices through your character that impact the game world. It's the magic sauce that distinguishes RPGs from media like books or even video games, which ultimately are limited by their programming. So we know that a problem is the violation of player agency. But what does agency actually mean in practice? It's more than just being offered a choice. It's a system contained in a single pillar. And if one of its parts breaks, the whole thing comes crashing down. The pillar of player agency. What do we need as GMs to make sure our players do feel empowered? It all comes down to three interconnected parts: choice, control, and influence. At the base of the pillar is choice. This is the foundation upon which all else rests. Players must have multiple viable options available to them. A scenario with only one real path forward offers no real choice. And for a choice to be meaningful, players need enough information to anticipate the likely consequences of their actions. A choice entirely made in the dark isn't really a decision, it's a guess. Now, the body of the pillar is control. This is the player's ability to actually act upon a chosen path. If a player decides their rogue will sneak past a guard, but the GM decides you automatically fail because the plot needs you to be captured, that player's control has essentially been taken away. This is where the infamous illusion of choice lives. Presenting two doors that lead to the same room isn't really respecting player agency. It's being fundamentally dishonest with your players, and it can shatter their trust. Now, this is also known as the quantum ogre maneuver. The capstone of the pillar is influence. Influence is the ability for a player to have choices that have a tangible, visible impact on the game world. It's the feedback loop that shows players their actions actually matter. When players see the consequences of their decisions, good or bad, it reinforces the sense of agency and makes the world feel alive and responsive. And these three parts of the pillar must work together. If a GM offers a choice, the foundation, but then negates the action, the body, or makes all choices lead to the same outcome, capstone, the system fails. Without agency, the potential for a truly emergent story is nearly impossible. How do you actually run and build a game that supports this pillar by default? Well, it kind of requires a fundamental shift in the GM's job description, so to speak, from behaving like an author to being something else entirely. The GM's role, author versus facilitator. So we're looking at this definition of the problem of railroading and the pillar of player agency that is needed to solve it. Now let's get to the heart of the matter. The one single change in mindset that prevents railroading before it can even start. So ask yourself, as a GM, are you an author or are you a facilitator? And many GMs operate under the misconception that their primary role is to be a master storyteller. This is the GM as author mindset. They prep an embedded narrative. It's a pre-structured story that needs to be protected, right? But the alternative is to embrace an emergent narrative. An emergent narrative is the story that arises organically from the interplay between the game's systems, the player's actions, and the world's reaction. It isn't pre-structured. It takes the shape through the process of playing the game itself. This changes the dynamic entirely. Instead of being a passive audience, the player becomes an active co-creator in the emergent story. Think of it on a spectrum. On one end, you have a linear narrative, like a novel, where the plot is fixed. In the middle, you have a branching narrative, like a choose-your-own adventure book, where player choices between pre-written paths exist. At the far end, you have an emergent narrative. There's no pre-authored paths. It is the artifact of the player's journey through the space of possibilities. You are not the author. You are the facilitator of an emergent story being created at the table. Your new job is to be the curator of coherence, maintaining the integrity of the world as the players react, and it reacts. Here's a golden rule. Place the players, not the GM's plot, in charge of the game's direction. Now, this all sounds great in theory, right? Just prep for an emergent narrative. But what does a game that is structurally built around this idea even look like? This is the West Marches campaign, and it's an expression of a player-driven game. The West Marches case study. So how do we force ourselves to be a facilitator instead of an author? What if we ran a game where it was literally impossible to prep a plot? Well, that's the genius behind the West Marches campaign style pioneered by Ben Robbins. It's a complete structural framework designed from the ground up to be player-driven. A West Marches game is the quintessential of the so-called sandbox campaign, the ideal structure for emergent play. It's got a few core rules that do change everything, though. First, there's no set party and no regular game night. A game session only happens when a group of players from a large pool decides that they want to play. They pick a date, they tell the GM what their specific goal is. The GM's role is entirely reactive. They don't offer quests. They prepare for the expedition the players have initiated. The second, the campaign's focus is on exploration, not a central plot. The GM creates a large, dangerous wilderness filled with dungeons and ruins, but there is no overarching story connecting everything together. The player's motivations become the primary driver of the narrative. Third, the players are responsible for shared knowledge. They create and update a map of the known world and write session reports to inform other players about their discoveries. Now, this creates a shared, persistent world where the actions of one group, of course, have permanent consequences for all. The structure makes railroading impossible, but because the GM has no control over who will be playing or what they will pursue, preparing a linear plot is a futile exercise. The GM's prep is forced to become situational and modular. They don't write a story, they populate a world. In a West Marches game, you should consider the central character that drives the narrative, in this case, as the map itself. The story is fundamentally spatial and geographic, which is inherently nonlinear and player-driven. The GM's job is to simply hand the players the map and ask the most important question in a player-driven game. Where do you go next? What do you do? The West Marches is an incredible example of a pure player-driven design, but it can be a lot to manage. So how do we apply these principles at our own table tonight to start putting your players in charge of a player-driven toolkit? Now, we've journeyed and emerged from defining railroad to understanding the pillar of player agency, shifting the GM's role, and even exploring the West Marches style. How do you start running a player-driven game right now without having to change your entire campaign structure? Well, it fundamentally starts with a few key tools and procedures. First, your foundation is the session zero. This is where the social contract is forged, We talk about player alignment, about expectations and tone and style, and openly discuss player agency. Crucially, it is where players create their characters and, in doing so, provide the GM with the initial narrative seeds for the campaign. Now, their goals here ensure the story is about them from the very beginning. However, second, adopt the mantra, prep situations, not plots. This idea, championed by Justin Alexander, is, I would have to agree with him, a game changer. A plot is a fragile sequence of events. A situation is just a set of circumstances. Your job is to create a volatile situation, a powder keg, and the player's choices determine if and when and how it explodes. Third, learn a lot more about the art of improvisation. This is probably the single most crucial skill for running any emergent game. The core principles are yes and its cousin, yes but. However, there is so much more to understand about improvising, but that is a topic for another video. When a player proposes an action, the default is to accept the premise, yes, and then build on it by adding a new element or consequence, that's the and. Now this validates player agency while allowing you to adjust the outcome narratively in a productive direction. By committing to this philosophy, all the best practices can start to fall into place. You must listen to your players. You must be flexible. You stop being the engineer on a fixed track and become the conductor of a collaborative orchestra, helping the players to create a unique emergent symphony that no one could have predicted. Now, much of what you need for the next session emerges from the previous session. The ideas build on each other, moving from theory to concrete example, and then finally into your toolkit. And if this philosophy shift has given you a bit of an aha moment for your own game, let me know in the comments below. Now go put your players in charge. But don't forget, I don't often ask, like and subscribe and hit the bell, or dislike at your own discretion.